is a huge, huge, unbelievable honor to be podcast interviewing my buddy Stephen J. Anderson, who we met, 25 years ago. For over 3 decades, Steve has studied, applied, proven, and proclaimed all human action is grounded in natural law. Know the law, and better results can be predictably designed. Ignorance of the law, however, does not free one from it. As a behavioral physicist, he identifies the applicable natural laws, educates, and designs systems to accomplish predictable and consistent results. You probably know Steve so many different ways. I met him 25 years ago with in dental boot camp with a K, with Walter Haley. When I went to that course, I think Bill Dickerson was there, who we podcast interviewed. So was David Hornbrook, who we've podcast. Just about every legend I can think of in dentistry at that time, 25 years ago, was there. You're probably also, everyone knows of you, of your Crown Council. Then you started that charity smilesforlife.org, which is the largest dental charity that I know of. I mean, you're coming up on almost $40 million of donated dental services. I mean, man, you need to start more projects.
Well, I'll tell you, it was a funny thing, Howard. You remember back years ago when we were at the Profitable Dentist together. You were on the program. Me and Walter were on the program. You remember that? And a few years ago, Woody was nice enough to give me his Dental Businessman of the Year award, which I didn't even know what that meant. That's been about 10 years ago. So I decided I better live up to the award. So I had to go out and do something so I could deserve it. So yeah, I'm a problem solver and love to tackle problems. You know, I'm not a dentist. I got sucked into this years ago. Walter and I had a training company that we worked with all kinds of businesses, and dentistry kind of showed up on the scene. And so really for the last 25 years, my professional world has been very centered around all things dental. So we've tried to tackle some of the biggest challenges on the business side of dentistry, and as well as try and do some good, and like we've done in Smiles for Life, and it continues to grow. It's been a phenomenal experience to do all that.
So what is it in Texas? Because you mentioned Woody Oaks, and Woody Oaks picked up where another Texas legend, Earl Estep, he had the first really newsletter. It's called Country Gold. Yep. And then one day he retired, and Woody Oaks was so heartbroken that he took all the old issues and started the Profitable Dentist newsletter. And you could say that, you know, the telegraph to the telephone to the internet, that it was Earl Estep to the Profitable Dentist, and now you. I mean, it's there's just something about the water in Texas. But my first question to you, you know, when I met you 25 years ago, we would just submit our fees to insurance, and the insurance would just pick a percent. They'd pay 100% clean exams and x-rays, 80% fillings, crowns, 50% crowns and partials and dentures. And then now they sent you the fees. It's a PPO. Podcast listeners, all of our evidence of who's listening to this show is they're all 30 and under. And they're young kids, and they're looking at Steve and Howard saying, well, wait a minute, you guys graduated in the glory days, indemnity insurance, you just submitted your fee, they paid everything. Now they're working with a 40% reduced fee schedule. Marco, the economist at the American Dental Association, shows that dentist income peaked 10 years ago in 2005 at $219,000 a year, and it's dropped $3,800 a year for a decade, and it's now down to $174. So we've lost basically $40,000 of yearly income from a decade ago. And you're a big macroeconomic vision guy. Is dentistry headed towards Walgreens and CVC? What's your advice to these kids that say, man, there's a corporate dental office on every corner. All my patients have PPOs, and they keep telling me to buy all this expensive equipment and CBCTs and CAD cams and lasers and build Ferraris, but the PPO is paying me for a Chevy. You know, what do you make of this industry right now, and where's it headed?
It's a good question, Howard. And I think I've got a unique perspective on two fronts. One, I'm not a dentist. Two, you and I have been at this for quite a while, 3 decades. And 3, I'm all over the country every week. I'm someplace different, speaking or working with dental practice. So it's pretty easy to keep kind of the pulse of what's going on. And so let me share my perspective with a story. I was at the Hinman meeting back in March. and I was sitting on the bus headed over to the VIP reception that they had over at Delta Airlines museum, and I happened to sit next to a dentist that I've known for many, many years, and he kind of started down the woe is me list of all the things that are changing in dentistry, and downward pressure on fees, and corporate dentistry, and insurance. He just went down the list, and he said, things will just never be this way they were. And so he was waiting for me to kind of commiserate with him and say, yeah, it's horrible. And I said, yeah. I said, my response to that was, I said, yeah, isn't it great? And he looked at me and he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, take the dentistry part out of it. Anytime there is massive change in any industry or any area, there is huge opportunity. You show me someplace where it's kind of stagnant and everybody, where things aren't changing, it's hard to break in. But anytime there's change, there is huge opportunity to go in and identify where the new opportunities are, where the underserved markets are, where things are going, and get in there and do things in a different way that will lead to greater success. The ones, Howard, that we see, the dentists that are struggling today, are the ones that are wishing that things would get back to the way they were 10 years ago. The cosmetic boom and everything was going crazy, and they're waiting for those days to return. They're never coming back. If you look at demographics alone has fundamentally changed this industry. 10 years ago, you had the baby boomers that were making a lot of money and spending huge amounts of money on cosmetic dentistry. They are now turning 65 years old at the rate of 10,000 people a day. 10,000 people a day turning 65 in this country every day for the next 15 years. Do the math. So if you're a young dentist, 30-ish or younger, 10, 15 years from now, you better be prepared to deal with a lot of geriatric patients. And it's a huge market and a huge opportunity. All those people are going to have all that cosmetic dentistry redone or updated. They're going to have a whole new set of needs. Their shift in focus has gone not just from appearance, but total health. Dentistry has now gone from just fixing the teeth to look pretty to what's going on in my mouth is affecting my total health. And so the exciting thing to me about it is that dentistry, in contrast to where it was 10, 20 years ago, back when we first met, Howard, you almost had to apologize that you were a dentist. Say, what do you do? Well, I'm Dr. Farran. I'm not a real doctor. I'm just a dentist. Today, you introduce yourself and say, I'm Howard Farran, and I am not a physician, and I'm grateful. Because dentistry today is the frontline healthcare profession. Physicians have now taken the back seat. Think about it. There is no other healthcare professional that patients see more, as in mass, more frequently than a dentist. You've got 60% of the population that has dental insurance that will see the dentist on an annual basis. You've got 40% that don't have insurance that'll go to the dentist on a regular basis. So on average, you got about 50% of the population that's going to the dentist on a regular basis. Now, there's two things to remember about that. One is, 50% of the population is going on a regular basis. That's good news. The second good news is, and I'll give you a little political analogy here. What's the largest voting bloc in America? Since we're in, election season, largest voting bloc in America.
People with teeth.
The bloc that doesn't vote. Think about it. You only have 30 to 40% of the population that will vote on election day. So if you can mobilize the bloc that doesn't vote, you win the election. And both parties know that. And so they're always engaging in activities to energize the bloc that's not voting, because that will change the course of the country. So when you take a look at that in dentistry in context, you have half the population that doesn't go to the dentist. If you could mobilize that group, if you could tap into the group that's not going on a regular basis, you would own this industry. So no matter where you are in whatever market you are, here's what I would suggest, is instead of looking at what everybody else is doing and copying and being a Me Too guy, why not go out and look at the folks that aren't being served? or are underserved and figure out how to serve an underserved market. There is so much opportunity here today, probably more, Howard, than you and I have seen in 30 years. Just because of the massive amount of change that's going on, there's opportunity everywhere.
So you're so how do you do that? So how do you go in and tell your hygienist and your assistant and your receptionist how do you lead this team? How do you cross that chasm? Is it chasm or chasm?
Well, whatever you want to call it, Howard. You make the rules, so it's all good. So here's one thing that hasn't changed. I think you'll find this fascinating. Well, we've talked about a lot that is changing. Here's what hasn't changed. We helped commission a study that was done by the University of Massachusetts at Boston. It was a scientific study. It was a public health survey. And the goal of it was to determine what the public's perception of dentistry is today. What is it that the public looks for in a dentist? Now, here's one of the fascinating findings of this study. 81% of America, and this was all across the country, different patient types, so it was very representative of the country. 81% of the respondents, so call it 81% of America, said that given the choice, they would prefer to choose their dentist based on, guess what? Not the internet, not a Google search, not a direct mail piece, but word of mouth. That hasn't changed in decades. So at the end of the day, that's their preference. Now, do they look at online reviews? Absolutely. That's a form of word of mouth. Dentists and physicians are the most reviewed businesses, with the exception of restaurants. Restaurants are the #1 most reviewed business on the internet. Dentists and physicians are #2. So reviews are a type of word of mouth. So where does word of mouth come from? It comes from one thing. Not your location, not your decor, not all the fancy technology. All those things are important. But at the end of the day, when a patient feels compelled to tell someone else about you, your practice, or leave an online review, it's because of how they felt when they were in your chair. That hasn't changed. So here's Howard, you mentioned in the introduction about, I coined this funny phrase, a behavioral physicist. What's a behavioral physicist? Here's what I like to do. I like to find natural laws that make the world turn and then build systems on those natural laws that will help a practice be successful. Okay, so let me contrast the difference between a rule and a natural law. A rule is made by man. And Howard, rules are made to be
broken.
Broken, exactly. Okay, now what's the difference between a rule and a natural law? Who makes a natural law?
It just is.
God or nature does, right? And what happens when you break a natural law? You don't break it, it breaks you, right? So so for example, if I were to hold up my cell phone and open my hand, where's it going to go? It's going to go to the ground. If I did that 100 times, it would go to the ground every single time. It's the natural law of gravity. It's consistent, it's predictable, it happens every time, to the point that if I open my hand and it flew up in the air, end of the program, right? Because that's not the way it works. So just as there are natural laws in physics and nature, there are natural laws of human behavior, of patient behavior, that are consistent, they are predictable. They're not 100%. I don't think there's any 100% solution, but they are very predictable. Here's one that's one of my favorites, that is at work every day with the team and with patients, whether you like it or not. And that's the thing about a natural law. You don't have to like it, but it's working either for or against you. So here's one. It's called the law of emotion. What it says is that we all make decisions emotionally, and then we justify that emotional decision with logic. We are experts at explaining away, rationally explaining away, our totally irrational behavior. We've got a reason for everything, even when it makes absolutely no sense. That's going on every single day in the dental practice with the team, with patients. We joke about the PETA patients, the pain in the you-know-what patients. Everybody talks about those. And we think they're crazy. But if you were to ask them, they would be able to explain their totally irrational behavior without any problem. To them, it seems logical. They're making an emotional decision every single day. When they leave a review, that's an emotional reaction to the experience they had in their practice. So regardless of your practice type, whether you're working in corporate dentistry, whether you're private practice, whether you're doing medic, at the end of the day, every single patient that walks through the door is making an emotional decision about you. They are no judge of quality of care. My mentor, Howard, you'll remember this from years ago. My mentor, W. Edwards Deming, who was the grandfather, the father of the whole quality movement across the world, he passed away in 1993. I spent the last week of his life with him. And one of the things that he said was that he said, what is quality dentistry? Okay, this is the grandfather of quality. This is the guy who launched Japan on the world stage as building the finest products in the world. And he talked about dentistry as what is quality dentistry? And he said, it is a question that will never be answered. He said because of two reasons. One, dentists refuse to be evaluated. And number two, the patient doesn't know what a quality job is for years after the work has been done. So the patient's not a judge of quality of care. What's the only thing they have left to judge by is how they felt and what kind of experience they had. It's our obligation as a profession to do quality care. The experience they have is what will build the practice. It's word of mouth. That hasn't changed. So here's my question. If you're listening to this from a practice management standpoint, and every single dentist that's listening to this is in practice management. I don't care whether you're an associate, a partner, an owner, everyone is in practice management. You are managing patient care every day. So here's my question. What are you doing to manage the emotional environment in your practice with your team as well as with your patients? Just as there is a science to clinical quality of care, there is a science to managing the emotional environment in your office, because that is the reason patients repeat and refer. You got to have great quality dentistry, and you have to have an environment and personal treatment that compels them to repeat and refer.
What did you mean by, what did Demings mean when he said dentists refuse to be evaluated?
When was the last time, Howard, that you saw a group of dentists get together on their own and bring 100 charts or 50 charts or 12 charts of patients that they'd work on and sit down as a group and trade charts and allow each other to see how they treatment plan something and evaluate each other's work and judge it and grade it and do it? We don't do that as a general rule in dentistry. In other words, there's no forum for that. We come up with standard of care, and standard of care is kind of the communal idea of what quality care is. But see, the patient doesn't know. The patient has no clue of what quality care is. So his point was that, what's a quality automobile? Well, you can tell if the car's pretty good based on the first few 1,000 miles you drive it. Dentistry is a lot more difficult for the patient to judge whether it's good or not. And that was his whole point is at the end of the day, what drives dentistry is the patient experience and how they feel when they're there, because it's very difficult to wrap your arms around quality care.
Well, it was a trick question when you said, what is a quality car? Because the answer is a Ford 150 truck. It's an F-150 truck.
That's what I drive.
So it was a trick question. Well, even when you show the dentist, you said that, humans are experts at explaining irrational behavior. Even when you show the data that the average mercury silver filling lasts 38 years and their posterior composites last half of that, they can't even accept that. I mean, they'll just say, oh, well, everyone else does it wrong but me. I do it perfect. And it's like, okay, well, if you go to KFC and they give you a plastic fork and then they give you a metal fork from your house, go to the guy that lives behind the dumpster at KFC and ask him which one lasts longer.
He'll tell you.
The dumpster guy knows it's the metal fork, but a dentist still thinks it's a plastic fork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
So,
so this,
the problem I see with what you're saying is, though, the natural selection of, in order to get into dental school, medical school, law school, you had to live in a library and make 4.0s. If you were well rounded in college and joined a frat and had a girlfriend and went out and made A's, B's, and C's, you wouldn't be a dentist. So the only people that got in were these librarian freaks. I mean, I heard every night at Creighton, ding, the library will be closing in 10 minutes. And then you walk back to the dorm and see all the business majors, hanging out and shooting pool and listening to music. So how do you lead? There's 218,000 people alive in America that have a dental degree, and they're all librarian freaks. How do you train librarian, physicist, mathematician, engineer, dentist to create a culture where patients are going to want to repeat and come back and have your staff? How does this introvert scientist create a culture like that?
it's a learned skill, and let me explain it to you. Let me go back to Deming for a minute. One of the things that he shared that was one of his principles is he said 94% of success is in the system. And what he meant by that was, if you have an effective system that has been proven to get consistent, predictable results, then if you want those results, all you have to do is follow the system. So what's the system? So here would be my plea to everyone listening is, if there is a result that you want, then what is the system that you're using to get the result you want? Because either you don't have a system, or you're not following the one that you should have in place to get that result. So just as there is a system for clinical dentistry and getting a consistent, predictable result, for example, with a crown prep, there are systems that you can use to get consistent, predictable results in every area of your practice. So let me give you an example of one. And this that has to do with culture. And Howard, I will tell you this. Let me share with you where I first learned this lesson. I grew up, my dad, you talk a lot about your dad, who was a very successful restaurateur. I had my father, who is now 93, ran the largest ad agency in the Western United States his whole career. I was raised on a steady diet of marketing and advertising. We would have dinner table conversations about how many words you can have on a billboard and what colors evoke different consumer responses and return on investment in advertising expenses. We had those kind of dinner table conversations. And I'll never forget one time we were having this discussion. I was a teenager. And he said to me, he said, sometimes no advertising, spending absolutely nothing, will get you a better return on investment than the largest ad budget you could create. Sometimes doing nothing is better. And I didn't get it. And I said, well, how can, if you don't spend anything, how can that be a good return? He said, because if the environment in which the customer enters is not congruent with the image that's been projected, then the negative rebound effect of that will do more damage to the business than if you had been better off to do nothing at all to project that image out into the community. He said, so his biggest frustration as an advertising guy was to create this image, and then discovered that internally they couldn't handle the business that he generated. He had ads, Howard, that were so effective that they immediate response that he gets to some of the stuff. So I never forgot that. And I think it's probably one of the biggest reasons that I do what I do today. I've spent my whole career engineering the patient consumer experience so that whatever image is projected in the community, that whatever comes through that door, that they will have a great experience. They'll repeat, they'll refer, and they will accept quality care. So here, I'm going to give you an action item here. This is a huge takeaway in this area. We talked about 94% of successes in the system. Let me give you a case study of one of the most effective culture management case studies that I know. And a tremendous amount to be learned from this that can be copied and used by everyone who's listening. This was an organization that was a multi-generational organization, been around for decades, more than decades, and had slipped into decline. The whole organization had stagnated. Leadership had had gotten exhausted, and the whole thing needed a turnaround. A new leader was brought in. And this is a great example of how do you turn a culture around? Because I know there's a lot of people listening to this, Howard, right now that said, I would love dentistry if it weren't for the patients and my team.
Right.
Those are their two biggest frustrations.
Absolutely.
So there's a great lesson in this organizational turnaround. So this is what he did. The first order of business was he wrote a new organizational code of conduct. In other words, basically he said, we've got to turn this organization around. We've got to revolutionize the culture. And here are some basic fundamentals that we're all going to agree to turn that culture around. So let me share with you exactly what those were. And in fact, if you're listening to this, you can take notes on it because it is absolutely genius what he did. And then I'll tell you what his results were. So he had a few cultural rules. So number one, first rule was follow the leader. There's one leader of the organization, and if the organization is going to be successful, everybody has to be in lockstep with leadership and follow the leader. If you can't follow the leader, you don't have the right to work in the organization. And Howard, I'll tell you, there's some dentists that need to have that conversation with their team. If you're going to be on the bus, you got to ride the bus. And it is not acceptable to be on the bus and be criticizing the bus driver. If you're on it, you better be on it 100%. Number two was dump your junk. In other words, we came from an old culture. We're getting rid of all of the old cultural things that didn't work. We're starting new, fresh new page. Leave the old stuff behind. Now, how many offices, Howard, do you know that have team members that came from a previous office that bring all of their crap from the previous office to their next office, and they just keep doing the same thing? You got to understand what the culture is where you work and leave the other stuff behind. Number three rule was respect. Respect the leader, respect each other. Respect is not something you earn. Respect is something that you give. You can make a decision to treat each other with respect. Number four, show up. Okay, basic rule, but basically what he said was there are critically important things and events that we have to fall in line with, and you got to show up. Like, for example, a morning meeting. You better be there because that's one of the fundamental things that causes a practice to be successful if you have a right system, if systems in place. So you got to show up. Number five, show respect for each other's roles and responsibilities. Everybody has a role and responsibility. Help support and make sure that they're successful in that role. That's part of your responsibility as a member of the organization. Rule 6, don't mess with someone's livelihood, meaning they've got a job to do. And if you have it out for somebody and you're trying to undermine their performance by gossiping, by doing whatever you can so that they won't be successful, not only are you impacting their job, but you're impacting the livelihood of all the lives that are dependent on that person. You got it out for somebody, you're messing with lives, not just somebody's paycheck. Number 7, be respectful of other people's relationships. There are working relationships that are absolutely critical. Don't mess with those. Don't try and destroy working relationships that other people have. 8, don't take what doesn't belong to you. Number 9 is cheer each other on, be honest. And number 10 is be each other's greatest cheerleader. Okay, now these are just basic, fundamental. This is the kind of culture that we want to have. So here's what he did, Howard. This case study is fascinating. He put these in writing. He presented them to the organization. He said, new day, new culture. We're throwing the old culture behind. This is the kind of culture we're going to have moving forward. Live it or you're out, so you're out of the culture. These are the rules. Now, the results of this have been written up. It is one of the most written, one of the most proclaimed cultural revolutions, organizational turnarounds in history. Who was the leader? It was a guy named Moses. And what was the organization? It was the children of Israel, who he led over 1 million of them out of an old corrupt culture in Egypt and created a whole brand new culture out in the wilderness. Now, you didn't know this was going to be a Sunday school lesson here. Take the religion out of it. It is a fascinating organizational culture case study. Now, what were the rules? They were called the 10 Commandments. So in case it's been a while since you've read the 10 Commandments, here's what they are. Number 1, have no other gods before me. What does that mean? Follow the leader. There's one person in charge. You better follow the leader because that's how the organization is going to be successful. What was the second commandment? No graven images. That's what they worshipped in Egypt. So he basically said, we're leaving the old culture behind, leaving all that behind, and we got a new culture. 3, don't take the name of the Lord in vain. That was show respect. For the respect of the leader is respect of the led. Fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day. What was the whole purpose of that? That was simply show up for the important stuff. Sabbath day observance was a culturally bonding ritual that they went through every week. It codified that whole culture together. 5, honor your father and mother. In other words, respect other people's roles and responsibilities. You don't have to, Howard, you'll notice it doesn't say love your father and mother. It says honor them. You don't have to love them. You don't even have to like them. But you honor the role that they have in your life. And you do that by showing respect and honor. The same thing in an organization. You honor people's roles and responsibilities. You don't have to like them, but you can honor their role. Next commandment, 6, don't kill. In other words, respect each other's livelihood. Don't be messing with someone's job. You kill their job and their opportunity to make a living, you have affected potentially countless lives. Number 7, don't commit adultery. What's that about? Don't mess with working relationships that are critically important to the organization. Support those relationships and make them work. Next, don't steal. That's pretty clear. Next, don't bear false witness. Don't gossip. Don't undermine the organization and the relationships in it. And the 10th commandment, don't covet. In other words, when you covet, you wish you had something that somebody else did. You're not cheering them on. You got to cheer them on. You got to support them. You got to make it all work. So there's an interesting just case study, Howard. If you want a culture where patients repeat and refer, you can either let that culture happen by default or by design. And my plea is that you spend as much time on creating a culture by design as you do on your clinical expertise. Because if you don't do it by design, it will happen by default. And here's another natural law. Nature abhors a vacuum. What is a vacuum? A vacuum is an open space. And nature will not allow anything. It will fill it. If you haven't designed your culture and you've left it by default, it will be filled. That culture will be created by the strongest personality in your practice. And usually it's a team member that you hired that senses the void in the cultural structure and will step in and single-handedly define the culture in your practice, whether you like it or not. So take the lead, decide what kind of culture you want. Now let me share with you my personal Moses moment and the takeaway here. Howard, do you remember when we first met, you came down to Hunt, Texas, and we did our seminars down there on Walter Haley's ranch in Hunt, Texas. And he and I traveled all over the country nearly every week speaking and working with dental practices and businesses. And every Friday night, I would be sitting in Dallas at the DFW airport in Dallas at 9:30, waiting for the 10:30 connection to San Antonio. Get into San Antonio at 11:30 and then drive an hour and a half out to the Texas Hill Country and get home about 1 a.m. every Friday night. I was sitting at DFW one weekend on Friday night waiting for the connection, and this thought dawned on me. It was, if I lived here, I'd be home right now. And so we made the decision to move the company operations to Dallas, Texas, now 16 years ago. We moved to Dallas. A lot of the team came with us. We hired some new people, and here was my Moses moment. I was sitting in my conference room at 7:45 one Monday morning. We always had a morning meeting, waiting for the team to show up. 7:45 was the time. 7:45, I was still sitting there by myself. 7:50, still all by myself. Long about 7:55, a few team members strolled in, and then we finally got started about 8 o'clock. Does this sound familiar, Howard? And I had smoke blowing out my ears. I was steamed because I'm an on-time guy. And before I said anything, I had this realization that I had not fairly treated my team because I had never clearly articulated my cultural expectation about times when meeting starts and how that works. And so I left that meeting when we concluded, and I left the office, and I went out on my own, and I wrote my version that day of my own organizational 10 commandments and brought them back to the team the next day, and we sat down and had a discussion about what kind of culture we wanted in our business, what kind of culture we wanted, how we wanted to treat each other, and what kind of culture we wanted our customers to come into. And there were some very specific, clear guidelines in what I now call a culture guide. And what it is they're very specific statements about the kind of culture. So let me share with you just two of them that are key, that are some of my favorites. So one of them, in reference to my morning meeting experience, says this is one of the culture guide items. It says, be early. Everyone wants to work with a team where everyone can rely on each other. It starts first thing every day. That's why we all agree that when you're early, you're on time. When you're on time, you're late. And when you're late, you're lost. So that now is the cultural expectation. If we're having a meeting at 7:45, now everyone knows that the only acceptable behavior in our culture is you better be in place by the latest at 7:40. Because at 7:45 on the dot, we are starting that meeting. We're not wandering around the office going, hey, everybody, it's time to start. Come on in, get your coffee. No, we're starting. The bus is leaving the station at 7:45. And that gets reinforced. And that now is how the culture is, because that's what we decided. Here's another one. This is one of my favorites. Leave your baggage at the door. Everything that happens in our office every day has an impact on each team member and influences how we interact with our customers. Team members bring the best of who they are to work each day by leaving their baggage at the door and not allowing issues in their personal life to negatively affect other team members. We consider our work environment to be the stage on which we perform our very best. And so that's why we have a sign up in the office that says, you're on stage. Because you are. Howard, when you think about your practice, it's a stage. And every team member in it is on that stage every day performing. Not a phony performance. They're bringing the best of who they are and what they have to perform every day. And that is the cultural standard. So the original culture guide had some 21 different culture guide items. I wasn't smart enough to get it down to 10. But they're 21 behavioral standards that make up our culture. It will change the way you operate. And so one of my challenges, Howard, is for everybody listening, is to sit down and have your own Moses moment and write out what your personal cultural expectations are of your team. If you don't do it, you will have a culture by default. And the strongest personalities will define your culture. Take the lead, step up, decide what kind of culture you want, what kind of experience you want your patient to have. Put it in writing. Go over it with your team. Talk about how it applies, and then review it constantly, over and over and over, so everyone knows exactly what's expected in your culture.
Okay, can I tell you what they're saying? Okay, so podcasting is under 30. It's a multitask behavior. They're all commuting to work. They're on the treadmill. They're on the Stairmaster. I know what they're saying when they hear what you say. They're saying, I'm not a leader. You're a leader. You're 50. You're a leader. I got out of school. I was 25. I bought this practice. They're never going to follow me. How, were you born a leader? They'll even tell you, I'm not a leader. I can't tell at 27 years old. I can't tell my 40-year-old hygienist what to do. I can't tell my 50-year-old office manager who was in that office the 30 years before I bought old man McGregor's office. They're never going to listen to me.
Let me share an experience with you, Howard. I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been there. When I first started out of college, and there's a whole, you remember that whole story. I interviewed all over the country. I had 60 different mentors. I had all kinds of amazing job offers. And I turned them all down, packed up, moved 1,200 miles to go into business with a mentor of mine, Walter Haley, for no pay. I was crazy. No pay proposition. My proposition to him was that he didn't have to pay me anything, only what I earned, because I wanted to be a partner, not an employee. And there was an organization that existed. It grew for several years, and I was, Howard, the youngest person in our whole organization. I was in my early 20s. There were people in our organization that were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'll tell you a short story. The organization was in disarray. And I sat down with the team. We had a team meeting one day, and I said, you know what? I thought I'd just throw out this idea. I've mapped out all of the things that need to be done. And I recommend this, Howard, for any practice. I've written out all the different tasks that need to be done for this organization to be successful. All the tasks. And I've grouped them in groups that seem to kind of go together, tasks that kind of go together. And I've kind of put a label on them as all good. So let's just go through this hypothetical exercise. Everyone's going to discard their job that they're doing now, and you can go around the table and you can kind of pick up the tasks that seem to fit you the best. And so everybody walked around the table and everybody kind of picked up their piece of paper and what they thought, all the tasks that they were doing that they felt most qualified to do. And when we were done, okay, now keep in mind, I'm the kid. I'm the 20-something-year-old kid in this organization. I'm the pup. I'm the young dentist. Okay, I'm not a dentist, but the equivalent of being the young dentist. The only piece of paper left on the table when everybody had picked up their responsibilities was all of the tasks associated with leading the organization, being the president of the organization. It was just sitting there. And somebody said, well, who's going to do that? And somebody turned and said, well, Steve's already doing all that stuff, so let's just give him the title. Now, I don't say that to brag on myself, but here's the lesson. Titles don't mean anything. You can give someone a title, but unless they earn it, no one will ever respect you. Here's how you lead people older than you. If you're the youngest dentist and everybody on your team has more experience than you do, admit it, Howard. Admit it. Go to your hygienist, go to your seasoned team members that have been in dentistry far longer than you are, and say the four most powerful words I know. And here's what they are. I need your help. Go to your seasoned hygienist and say, you know what? I need your help. You've been in dentistry for 20 years. I've been in it for 2. Or I've been in it for 6 months. Or I've been in it for 3. You know so much more about dentistry than I do. Now, I may have a degree. Legally, I'm the one that gets to do the dentistry. But in terms of the dental business overall, you know more about this in so many areas than I do. I need your help. And here's exactly where I need your help. And then outline it. In other words, the best way to be a leader of any age, but especially if you're young, is ask for the help of the people around you to make you successful. And here's what I would say to that hygienist or dental assistant, whoever that has more experience and more years than I do. I need your help because you know things I don't know. I'm the one with the degree. I'm the one patients have to trust if they're going to accept treatment. So I need your help to be on my shoulder to point out things that I could do better, to know how to interact with the patient best. I need you to be my inside coach. So together we can both be successful. Will you do that? Will you be my coach? Being a coach is different than being a leader. You go ask for your team members to help you, and they will follow you anywhere. Everyone can detect a phony. And if you don't know something and you pretend like you do, they will smoke you out. They know you're young. They know you're inexperienced. So admit it and get their help to fill in the blanks where you don't know what to do. Admit it. Honesty and transparency will raise you higher in their view than anything you could do. Ask for their help and then ask them what you can do to help them be successful. Whether they're a dental assistant, a hygienist, whoever it is, you go to them and say, tell me what I can do for you to help you excel and succeed at your job. What do you need from me? And I will do whatever I can do to help you be successful. You do those two things. I don't care your age. You will be the most respected. You will rise, whether you've got the title or not. You will rise in their eyes as being the leader in your dental practice. Age has nothing to do with it.
What did you mean by there's a difference between a coach and a leader? What did you mean by that?
Coaching, I think, is a skill. And so here's the skill. I think coaching is a subset of leadership. So coaching is being able to sit side by side with someone and coach them to a higher level of performance. It's a good skill to have. A leader's job is to set the course and articulate the vision. Where are we going? So if I'm the young leader, then for me, all I have to do is figure out the basic direction where we want to go. And here's what I would say to my team. Here's where I want to take this practice. Here's what I want it to be like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. This is what I want it to look like. Now, here's where I need your help. I have no idea how to get there. I got some ideas. And so that's where I want to go. And with your help, we will arrive there. And that's where I need your help, is to fill in the blanks and figure out all the details so we can get where we want to go. But make no mistake, this is where we're going, gang. And if you're going to work in this practice, we all have to be in lockstep together in the direction that we've decided to go. The leader doesn't have to know everything, Howard. The leader just has to know where the group is going and articulate that and keep them headed in the right direction. Then they can backfill with talent and people that will help get to that destination.
Okay, Steve, everyone watching this on Dental Town or YouTube is seeing behind you Total Patient Service, Thompson. So if you're on iTunes, you're not seeing this, but what is totalpatientservice.com?
So Total Patient Service is our education. I hesitate to use the word consulting because I've got a funny joke about consultants. We're not consultants. But it is our brand that has where is housed all of our case acceptance and team case presentation technology. So we have courses that we do all over the country. We call it our Total Immersion course.
Total Immersion course?
Total Immersion, our Total Patient Service Total Immersion course that goes through, I consider it, Howard, basic training for any dentist and any team that wants to be a top performer in the area of case acceptance. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There is as much to learn about how to present a case and how to interact with patients as there is clinical dentistry. And so at Total Immersion, that's what we do. It is the system for presenting comprehensive dentistry in a way that patients will say yes. Everything we do has been tried and tested, and we implemented in practices all over the country and have successfully now for over 30 years. So that is, like I said, I consider it basic training for any dentist. And the earlier, the better. The younger you are, the more you'll benefit. I've had dentists that have been in their 50s and 60s, even their 70s, that have come through our total immersion course and have said to me, if I'd have known this when I was first coming out of dental school, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, the difference it would have made in my career and my results is uncalculable. Just because if you good clinical dentistry is important, but 85% of your success is going to come from your ability to deal effectively with your patients. You may be the most brilliant clinician in the world, and if you can't communicate it, then none of that clinical expertise will ever come to fruition. You gotta know the formula for how to work with your patients. And just as there is a system for clinical dentistry, there are systems for patient care, communication, and case acceptance.
Now, is this a 1-day course, a 2-day course? How does this work logistically?
A couple of days. So
it's a 2-day course?
Typically Thursday, Friday. We run them all over the country. And all the dates and locations are at totalpatientservice.com.
And what I've noticed, Steve, is that whenever you go to a lecture, the right half of the room is all individuals that come by themselves to save money. And then the left half of the room, every row is a complete office. And if you went and picked up the taxes paid or the balance sheet or the income or tax, what do you think the dentist's income would be who takes their entire staff with them to these courses versus the dentist that comes saving money and always comes alone?
There is such a huge disparity there, Howard, and this is the part that defies logic. The practices we work with that invest in their team, that take the time out of patient care to meet with their team and work on the practice, outperform the ones that try and save money and are concerned about taking away chair time to work on their team, but by huge multiples. You have to work to build the practice, and the lion's share of that work will come not from just seeing patients, but working on the systems and the communication skills and how you're actually going to do that. So huge difference. And I'll tell you, the most common comment we get from dentists who make the mistake of coming alone to our total immersion course is within the first 90 minutes, they will say, I just made a huge mistake. I should have brought my whole team. Yeah, because your team is your most valuable asset. They are the ones that have more patient interaction than you do. You show me a dentist who invests in the human assets in his or her practice, and I'll show you one who will far outperform the ones who don't. Huge difference.
Okay, and they're probably also thinking, what kind of office is best? Like, what if we're a PPO practice? I mean, they see some practices are high-end implants, high-end cosmetics. What if they're what if 85% of their patients are PPO and they're in Casa Grande, Arizona, where there's no rich people or movie stars? You know, a lot of people think, well, you know, the one advantage Bill Dorfman has is he's gorgeous and he's in Beverly Hills. And then they say, okay, I'm short, fat, and bald in Phoenix. Does this apply to me?
People are people, Howard. And I don't care where they live. I don't care where you live or what kind of practice you have. At the end of the day, your clinical expertise does not come into play until the patient says yes, regardless of how they're going to pay. Whether they're on a PPO plan or whether they're on Medicaid or whether they're paying straight out of their pocket. The one thing they all have in common, they all have to say yes before you can pick up your handpiece. So regardless of the kind of practice, and Howard, we work with all kinds of practices. There are so many ways to be successful in dentistry. There's more than just one practice model. We work with all kinds. They all have one thing in common. There is a patient attached to the teeth. And all of those patients have to say yes to dentistry. So regardless of the practice type, the systems remain very consistent because of the natural laws. I've shared one of them with you today, of the natural laws of human behavior in how they respond to your recommendations. So if you don't have a system for exactly how you present treatment that you have confidence in, that you know works, get a system. Whether it's mine or somebody else's, you need a science and a system for how you're presenting dentistry, regardless of your practice type.
Hey, Steve, I wish you'd come out to one of our county meetings and give a intro course to this and give them an introduction to it and maybe convert a lot of them to come back to a 2-day course.
Is that an invitation?
Absolutely. I just sent you an email as we were talking. By the way, that amazing. I loved your deal where I had no idea you were going to go into the 10 commandments and you started these 10. What did you call it? A culture guide?
Culture guide. Yeah.
Do you have that in writing?
I do. Yeah. So I
want to publish that in Dental Town magazine.
Perfect. Okay. So here's if you're listening, here's where you can get the whole explanation. So the book is called The Culture of Success, The Culture of Success. And if you go to this website, thecultureofsuccessbook.com, you can get a copy of the book. Now, in addition to that, Howard, I will send you a copy of the Culture Guide. And anyone listening who would like a copy of it, they can just email us at this email address. Just email us at answers@totalpatientservice, singular, totalpatientservice.com. Answers@totalpatientservice.com. Put the words Culture Guide in the subject line, and then just mention that you listen to this podcast, and we'll send you free of charge a copy of the Culture Guide. I highly recommend the book. The subtitle is The 10 Natural Laws for Creating the Place Where Everyone Wants to Work. Case acceptance starts with your culture, and that's why we outlined all of the specifics. Creating a culture guide is one of 10 different action items that we suggest to create a culture of success in your practice. So the cultureofsuccessbook.com, or email us at answers@totalpatientservice.com, and we'll send you a copy of the Culture Guide. If you order it through thecultureofsuccessbook.com, we'll send you some additional little goodies with the book that we can't send you through Amazon.
Wow, that is so your email is answers@totalpatientservice.com.
You got it.
And you can you summarize that for Dental Town?
Absolutely.
For the magazine?
I'd love to. Be happy to do that.
So the magazine since 2000 has been Tom Giacobbe. And so he's a dentist in Chandler, Arizona. So I basically have zero editorial control. That's why it's the best magazine in dentistry. And then the website is Howard Goldstein. But that is so profound, Steve. I think you should get with Howard Goldstein and do an online CE course. I think that would be the best marketing intro you could do, because yuppies and millennials, whatever yuppie and millennial tell you is that if you hold your iPhone up to a TV and you bring the iPhone back, you see how close it is, and then you can't even see the TV. So they'd rather lay there on their bed and lean up their iPhone against the pillow or sit on the couch, whereas you and I went to big screens and lectures and all that. And that magazine is amazing. Not only does it go to 127,000 dentists each month in the United States, but the distribution of it digitally. There's 217,000 dentists on Dental Town, and they're from literally every single country on earth. So they'll be reading this in Kathmandu and China and Malaysia and Indonesia and Japan and all that stuff. So yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to get a course out of you. I'd love to get an article out of you. Tom Giacobbe, I know Tom. He would love this. He's a good old Catholic boy from Chandler, and I didn't even see the 10 Commandments coming. That was really, really amazing.
It's a great example.
So I understand the website totalpatientservice.com, but above it, everybody on YouTube or Dental Town's reading, what's TOPS Institute?
So that it's just an abbreviation for Total Patient Service.
Okay, total patient.
That's all it is.
I never said I was the sharpest boy in the class.
There you go. That's all good.
And you promised me an hour of your time, and the hour's up. But can I ask you an overtime question?
You bet.
I think when Michael, my mom and I always had this argument. She thinks Fred Astaire was the greatest singer, dancer, songwriter in the entire world and universe. And always tell her it's Michael Jackson. And I told her that in China and Brazil and Russia and Malaysia, I've never seen anybody talk about Fred Astaire. But Michael Jackson's song was "The Man in the Mirror," and that kind of song tells me that your only competition's looking at you right in the mirror. And so many of these dentists say the sky's falling because they're looking out their window and they see an Aspen and a Heartland and a Pacific Dental. But I just want to tell you, so if your dental office works 50 weeks a year, give you 2 weeks vacation, so that means that on a 6-month recall, you'd see 25 weeks of these patients, and then you'd see them again the second 25 weeks. And the hygienist works 4 days a week at 8 hours a day. So if she works 25 weeks at 32 hours a week, she's going to see 800 hours twice a year. A cleaning's an hour. So she's going to see 800 patients twice a year. At 25 new patients a month, every 2.5 years, you'd add another hygienist. So here's this dentist complaining about Aspen and Heartland and Pacific Dental, and he's been practicing not 10 years, not 20 years, not 30 years. He's been going 40 years, and he still has one hygienist going, 8 hours a day, 32 hours a week. So the mathematics would say that every time this dentist gets 25 new patients, 25 go out the back door. I mean, it'd be like, the Colorado River. All the water goes to Mexico, but they build a Hoover Dam there, patient retention, patient loyalty, and they've made a lake you can't swim across. So is the problem really corporate dentistry when if you get 25 new patients a month, yet after 2.5 years, you don't add another hygienist?
Well, Howard, I'd say this, and I hope this has been one of the messages that's come out of this, is if you spend all your time looking out at everything that's going on and worried about all these things that you've mentioned, you're going to live we call them the worried well. You're going to live your life worried and paranoid about everything that's going on around you. Turn around and look inside. You're exactly on it. You're your own biggest competition. That's been kind of my whole message today is look at your own culture. If you're that far along in practice and you only have one hygienist or two, I'd say, boy, it's time for a cultural revolution here. What do we do? What kind of environment are our patients coming into? And do they feel compelled to come back? Because if they're just coming in to get their teeth cleaned, they can have that done anywhere. What are they coming into? What are you doing that compels them to repeat and refer? And that has more to do with how they're treated and the whole experience they have and how you are as a person than it does with your clinical skill. Clinical skills got to be there. But the culture is what keeps them coming back.
And your 2-day course for the whole team will teach that culture?
It is, Howard, like I said, it's basic training and has been for 30 years. You remember how we got started was all the panky guys that discovered us, and their biggest challenge was that they couldn't get patients to accept complete and comprehensive dentistry. And we showed them how to do that. And we've continued to do that for 30 years. It is probably the most consistent, widespread course on the topic in dentistry. You show me anybody that's a good clinician, just give me good basic dental skills. And that's what we do is show how you can catapult your practice performance by having good systems in place for case acceptance that work, that are based on human behavior.
And this was Stephen J. Anderson of Total Patient Service, who I met 25 years ago and is the wizard behind crowncouncil.com, smilesforlife.org. I knew you were a genius when I first met you when we were both pups.
We were.
And you are an amazing man, an amazing mind. I always thought of you as someone whose brain had zero gravity, zero limits. I mean, you were always a free thinker every time I've ever met you. I mean,
that goes both ways, Howard. So I would say the same thing about you. You've changed the face of dentistry for the better.
And you're the largest charity raiser of smilesforlife.org. By the way, how can any of my homies get involved with smilesforlife.org or Crown Council?
That is great question. So it is that whole program, Howard, is one of the most powerful new patient generators that has ever been designed in dentistry. And it's all on the shoulders of a cause-related charitable campaign. So just to keep things simple, if you want more information on it, you can go to smilesforlife.org, or again, just email us at that same email address, answers@totalpatientservice.com, and we'll send you all the Smiles for Life information. It is powerful stuff. You want to raise your image in your community and attract a whole new group of patients. It is a whole prepackaged charitable campaign that is a very, very powerful marketing system to use. It's on so many different fronts. So absolutely.
And on Twitter, that's SFL Charity, at SFL Charity?
So. I believe so, yeah.
Okay, and then you got to also talk about what is Crown Council. What is Crown Council, and how can they get involved with that?
So here's what Crown Council is Crown Council became an outgrowth of our training years ago at the request of the dentists that we had worked with, who came to us and said, we want a home, we want a place where we continually can work on creating a culture of success in our practice. And one of those elements that is essential to make it happen is to flock with eagles. I mean, to be with like-minded people where you can share all of the things that are working and raise the culture across the board. So the Crown Council is packed with ideas, techniques, and systems and resources like the ones we've talked about today, Howard, about how you create a culture. It is packed with resources that are specifically designed to build the culture in your practice. Your most powerful competitive advantage, I believe, is your culture.
That is amazing. Seriously, Stephen, thank you for all that you've done for dentistry. And can I take it to the bank that you'll print that in a Dental Town magazine and build us an online CE course?
I appreciate the invite. I'd be happy to do it.
And I hope to see you at Townie. That'd be profound, because, like I say, they think the sky's falling with corporate dentistry and PPOs and their income down 40,000, and someone needs to realize that the ship ain't sinking.
You got it. It is. Howard, I would say the future is brighter today in dentistry than I have ever seen it. A lot of change going on, huge opportunity. You just have to have the right glasses on.
Thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thanks, Howard. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.